At 6:47 a.m. on April 23, 2025, the USS William P. Lawrence entered the Taiwan Strait and carried out something shocking. It activated its identification system. In these waters, that's not a formality. It's a statement. Picture walking into the most dangerous alley on Earth with a spotlight fixed on your back. Every radar screen, every pilot, every coastal defense instantly knew she was present. Within minutes, sirens blared on a Chinese airfield. Jet engines thundered, and a calm morning along the strait transformed into a stage for confrontation. What unfolded was not a clash, but something even more perilous, a calculated contest of intimidation, where the margin between caution and catastrophe became razor sharp. Was this routine mission just another freedom of navigation operation? Or was it a close call with a conflict no one dares to ignite? If you want to discover the result of this mission, the answer awaits at the end of the video. As the Lawrence moved further into the strait, the setup for confrontation was already in place. 53 miles away, two J-16 pilots dashed across the runway. Chinese Navy Day had just been disrupted. Ground teams loaded each jet with 4 PL-10 heat-seeking missiles and 2 PL-15 radar-guided missiles. Not anti-ship weapons. But that was intentional. Beijing wasn't here to destroy a destroyer. It was here to show how effortlessly it could. Inside the Lawrence's Combat Information Center, the scene unfolded across glowing displays. The FPY radar monitored everything. Civilian planes departing Taipei, fishing trawlers scattered along the strait, American aircraft circling above. At its heart, the Aegis combat system merged these pieces into one image, a god's-eye view of the battle space, within 250 miles. And within 7 minutes, 2 fresh signals appeared, charging directly toward them. The strait is relentless, only 130 kilometers at its narrowest point. The destroyer navigated that passage like a tightrope performer. Rules of engagement carved into every sailor's memory. Weapons authorized only in self-defense. They spotted the J-16s well before the jets broke over the horizon. Yet they could do nothing but observe, document, and brace for the instant when restraint might no longer last. By 6:52 a.m., both J-16s were in the air, ascending past 10,000 feet. Their radars, the dreaded Type 1475 Ghost, locked onto the American destroyer with pinpoint accuracy. Unlike older systems that broadcast in all directions, this one whispered, unseen except by its chosen mark. For the sailors aboard Lawrence, the signal was crystal clear. You are being observed, tracked, evaluated. Every action is noted. The scene was prepared. 2 nations, 2 strategies, and 1 narrow strip of water, about to turn into the most perilous chessboard on Earth. At 7:11 a.m., the calm was shattered. The Lawrence's SLQ-32 electronic warfare system abruptly detected 2 fresh signals in the X-band. They were distinct, pulsing, and undeniably military. The fingerprints of airborne radars locking on. Inside the Combat Information Center, sailors shifted recording systems to full capture. Every pulse would turn into data. Every sweep stored for analysts back in Pearl Harbor. Above, the lead J-16 flipped inverted at 20,000 feet, diving nose first toward the sea. Through his helmet display, the American destroyer glowed like a beacon. At 500 feet altitude, he leveled out, driving his Saturn engines to burn 400 pounds of fuel each minute. This wasn't combat. It was a show of force. If those PL-15s beneath his wings had been YJ-83 anti-ship missiles, the Lawrence would already be locked into a terminal strike path. The fighter's WMD-7 targeting pod stabilized with such accuracy that it could read full numbers on the vessel below. Inside CIC, alarms layered one after another. The spy radar traced the approaching fighter. Fire control computed paths for RIM-162 ESSM, even marking which vertical launch cell doors to prepare. But doctrine kept the crew's hands restrained. This was the discipline of measured control, allowing the adversary to come near enough to menace, but not near enough to ignite a war. The Chinese pilot pushed harder, throttles buried in afterburner, closing in until he reached the Lawrence's final layer of defense. The Phalanx Sea Whiz automatically traced his course. Sailors watched as the R2-D2 with a Gatling gun rotated, its radar lock humming silent alerts. A single press of a button could unleash 4,500 rounds per minute, tearing the intruder apart in moments. Yet the system stayed dormant. Mirrored 5 miles to the east, his wingman carried out a flawless bracket maneuver, guaranteeing that if the destroyer locked onto one fighter, the other would have a clear path. It was a tactic forged in the Cold War, now reenacted above Taiwan's seas. The signal was unmistakable. We have considered every angle, and your safety relies solely on our restraint. But US carried messages of its own. High overhead, a US Navy MQ-4C Triton drone silently circled, streaming real-time imagery and signals back to the Lawrence. Unlike the Chinese display of strength, the Triton's presence was hidden from the naked eye. Evidence that US surveillance stretched farther, observed sharper, and lasted longer. On the destroyer's bridge, strain showed in every sailor's hold on the rails, every look at the radar screens. They were balancing on the razor's edge of military brinkmanship. And with each pass, each dive, each radar lock, the danger of an error, the wrong action at the wrong moment, grew greater. The standoff had evolved. This was no longer a routine flyby. It was a drill for scenarios that could set an entire region ablaze. By 7:23 a.m., the pattern intensified. 2 additional J-16s thundered off the mainland, their pilots' flesh, their fuel tanks topped, their purpose undeniable. The earlier flybys had been provocation. This was performance on a sharper stage. One jet descended to 200 feet, lower than the others before, rushing in at 500 knots. His heads-up display lit up with the silhouette of the American destroyer, every instrument dial screaming accuracy. At the same instant, the Lawrence's radar registered a large new contact, a Type 05D destroyer, the pride of China's surface navy, advancing quickly. Her Type 346A radar was already locked on, and although her YJ-18 anti-ship missiles stayed sealed in their cells, the message was unmistakable. Those weapons could reach Mach 3 in their terminal plunge, giving the Lawrence only seconds to react. Hemmed in from above by fighters and ahead by a warship, the American destroyer was caught in a 3-dimensional trap. Inside the CIC, the tactical action officer measured every choice, every contingency ingrained in doctrine. The rules of engagement still restricted them. No opening fire, no provocation. Yet the Chinese understood those rules as well, pushing harder with each maneuver, daring the Americans to hesitate. This was no accidental meeting. It was choreography crafted to deliver a message. China was ready to skate the edge of conflict to impose control. Then came the day's most perilous gamble. One J-16 streaked just 500 feet across the Lawrence's bow, afterburners blazing twin cones of flame. The thunder shook bridge windows, spilled coffee from tables, and forced sailors to grab for balance. At the same time, another fighter dropped to just 120 feet, far beneath safety limits, and roared within 200 feet of the port side. The destroyer's Sea Whiz batteries reacted instantly. Twin Vulcan cannons spun up to pre-fire rotation speed. Radars locked onto the aircraft. For 5 agonizing seconds, every sailor realized that one twitch, one accidental pull of a trigger, could set the Indo-Pacific ablaze. Displays in CIC lit with 2 massive radar echoes converging. The countdown to disaster was measured in heartbeats. And then another layer of deterrence quietly came into play. Deep inside the Lawrence's systems, a prototype Helios laser, a directed energy weapon, powered up silently, its beam unseen but prepared. Though it was never discharged, the activation alone served as a warning. US warships carried capabilities still out of Beijing's grasp. The pilots maintained their aggressive stance, afterburners flaring, their cockpits glowing with the light of targeting displays. The Lawrence's defenses pulled against electronic restraints, poised to release fury. This was brinkmanship at its rawest form. Two nations glaring across a hairline fracture in history, aware that the faintest tremor could split it wide open. When the fighters at last broke off, climbing sharply into the haze, every heartbeat aboard the Lawrence pounded with the same realization. War had come closer than ever. By 7:52 a.m., the tension finally eased. The J-16s, running low on fuel, ignited their afterburners and climbed sharply away, leaving behind vapor trails and the fading roar of engines across the strait. The Type 052D relaxed its intercept, shifting course to run parallel instead of confront. Inside CIC, sailors documented the encounter with clinical accuracy. Altitude, distance, radar locks, all preserved for intelligence officers who would analyze every move. On deck, the human toll was evident, not in losses, but in the quiet, heavy breaths of sailors who had balanced on the knife's edge. They had looked into the abyss of escalation, watched defenses whirl to readiness, and carried the weight of history pressing down on their shoulders. The Lawrence pushed south at 18 knots, steady and unwavering in her mission. She had not fired, had not stumbled, yet had demonstrated to the world the strength of discipline in the face of provocation. This was not triumph, counted in missiles, but in restraint. The USS William P. Lawrence pressed on with her southward course, engines steady against the tide. Yet the reverberations of the morning standoff endured. For 20 intense minutes, the strait had turned into an arena where restraint was pitted against aggression, and the boundary between routine patrol and outright conflict almost disappeared. What did the encounter reveal? For Beijing, it was a display of reach, proving that Chinese fighters and warships could close to within seconds of lethal range. For Washington, it was an exhibition of restraint, that even under crushing pressure, the U.S. Navy followed the rules, recorded every action, and held its course. Neither side pulled the trigger, yet both delivered messages that will echo through strategy rooms from Taipei to Washington, D.C. The wider implication is unsettling. Each maneuver, every radar lock, every supersonic flyby increases the chance of error. A lone pilot oversteering at 120 feet, a sailor misinterpreting a radar signal, a weapons officer pausing 1 second too long, or reacting 1 second too early. That is how wars no one intends can erupt. Still, in the midst of strain, one reality remains. American presence is not only about strength, it represents stability. The Lawrence moved forward not to incite, but to confirm that freedom of navigation is a value the world must not surrender. Power, in this context, is not domination. It is prevention. So the question persists. When the next shadow looms over the strait, will restraint prevail once more, or will history shift on a single heartbeat? Your opinion counts. Share your views in the comments below. Subscribe to stay connected, because the next act in this unfolding story is already taking shape. And when it unfolds, you'll want to be here to grasp it. Thank you for watching.